All right, thanks for joining us for another episode of Triple Play. Don't forget to
like and subscribe.
And share.
And share and comment.
We love comments. We love sharing.
Things.
And we got an episode coming up with Josh Beckett and Andy Van Slyke going to answer your questions. So, if you catch this episode before we do that, don't forget to send those in. And even after that episode, we're going to have those guys back again. So if there's a good question, we'll be sure to include it and bring it up. With that said, we want to support those that help support us. And don't forget to support Resource One and Andy McCollum at 636-458-1798 and CS Design at 573-436-3717. They're also in our show notes. So,
who we got today?
Hey, we got a great guy today. So we got Todd Perry. Todd has been a friend of mine, and we worshiped well before you got involved with what you're doing now.
Right.
His daughter used to play with my little kids when they were first born, and Amy would be doing her thing in the infant room, and I'd have my two young ones in the back, and he would play the guitar, and he'd come on back and sit with his bride and daughter. And
when you only had half your litter, there was only
at that time we're on 2 and 3. I mean, that was right when we started having them when we were out there. So. And then after that, got involved with getting to know Todd even more because we'll get into Pujols Foundation. But I started doing a lot of work with the Bowens and Christian Family Day and helping them out. So watched you for the last 20 or so years now. So we are blessed to have him today, and I keep getting these little glimpses of his past. So I'm actually kind of curious to learn a little bit about Todd. So Todd, tell us where'd you grow up? The St. Louis question. Where'd you go to high school? And give us a little bit about your background.
Well, first of all, thank you guys for having me. And you were talking about 20 years ago, and I'm like, wow, has it been that long? But but those were great times. Those were good days. And
yes, they were.
But no, I grew up. I grew up in rural Tennessee. I am a country boy at heart, and I guess in reality, grew up about 50 minutes outside of Nashville, and spent the first 30 years of my life there. Went to school in a rural community. It was Montgomery County, Montgomery Central High School is where I went. And so that's a lot to do with my worldview. The way I see things is very tied to that area of the country and just the way I was raised. And I often say, I came from a very authentic Christian family, and I think that that in itself is probably the one thing that has made the greatest difference in my life is being raised in an authentic Christian home.
Well, that's awesome. That's really, really cool. So did you come to know the Lord then at a young age through that, or was it like later in life? That was a good foundation.
Yeah, I grew up in church. I don't subscribe to I've been a Christian all my life because I've known of the Lord and knew the Lord all my life. But I think there are certain moments that trigger that commitment to the Lord and also that surrender to the Lord. And I think those things happen, or at least for me, over time. I know that when I was, when I was relatively young, 12, 13, I prayed the sinner's prayer. I accepted Christ in my life, but then there are moments that I look back at my life now, and it's like, okay, you know what? That's the moment when I really knew that I couldn't do this on my own. And that's the moment when I really had to surrender that, or I really surrendered this. And so, yeah, it's been a journey.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that each phase and each stage of my life has had its own challenges, but God has always been there and to draw me closer.
So where did the love for music come? Because that's when I first met you. That's what you were doing. You were helping out with worship at church when we first started going there, and you played a few different instruments. So it wasn't just one. I think you at that time kind of would transfer between the bass and electric a little bit. So
I mostly I was a guitar player back. in high school, I had some good friends, and my best friend at the time, and he and I started a band.
Oh, yeah.
And that was kind of the catalyst for me learning to play. And we played in bands for all the way almost through college. And I kind of got to the point where when I was in college and I was studying to be an illustrator, to be a painter, and I kind of got to that point, and it was probably maybe between like sophomore, junior year, I would guess, where I had to decide which one of these I was going to invest time in to become good, because I was good enough to get by as a musician. I was good enough to get by as an artist, but I wasn't good enough to be a professional at either one. And as long as I toggled back and forth, I was never going to be good enough to do either one of these things, which I wanted to do for a career. So that's when I decided, and the other side of that is, people would, it's like, oh, you play guitar, are you any good? And I would always say, oh, no, trust me, I've played with good people. I mean, in living in and around Nashville most of my life all of my life at the time, I mean, you would not believe the guys that are on their front porch or their back porch or, working as a mechanic and playing music at night that are phenomenal. I mean, absolutely just jaw-dropping, incredible musicians in that area. And it's just something and I guess maybe it's just the environment and all the music and the stimulus, but no, yeah, I am not good. Because I have played with good people, and they are, and people that no one will ever hear of that do, regular Joe Bag of Donuts, that, and so anyway, I knowing that and knowing the level that most of the people, and there was a guy that was in the band at the time, and I'm like, well, I will never be as good as him. And he, and he works for a place that does, wire bending. And it's like, I think I'll kind of chase the art thing. And
Since you had to choose between two different things, because sports, like maybe I didn't know if I want to play basketball or baseball, but I could still play both because playing basketball benefited me, baseball athletically. That stinks you had to choose so early.
Yeah, I think and I never really thought of it because music was really big in my home. My dad had a little. It was him and a gentleman named Bill Akins, and they would they started they would sing in church.
Okay.
And the
A cappella?
No. Bill played the guitar, and then Bill's brother Steve played electric. I mean, man, Steve was, and again, another one of those guys that you just watch and you're just like, wow, I can never play that good. And these just a little country church, and they were just so good. And so I was always around it, and it was the Louvin brothers and Hank Williams, and just that old just beautiful, incredible harmonies and the songs that just as Emmylou Harris would say, that these are the washed in the blood songs that are just that you just don't hear anymore, and that was really the way my musical taste evolved, and was the foundation of that, and still is what I think is some of the best music ever created. But it's just how I grew up, and so I've always had that it was always just part of my life. And then I remember in kindergarten, I remember this like it was yesterday, and I was 5 years old, and I remember I was drawing, and it was a picture of like a Godzilla, and the teacher comes up behind me, and she takes it and she goes, "Oh my gosh, we have an artist in the class." And she hung it on the wall, and I remember all the little kids run over there and they go, "Ooh." And I was like, everybody can't do this? And I remember thinking, oh, wow, okay, you know, I have something that makes me special. Even then, and I kind of chased that rabbit really hard because it's like, okay, well, everybody can't do this. So that's something that, you know, separates me from the pack. And so I think that's why kind of I went in both those directions, because I think that, you know, playing music or, you know, being able to draw or being artistic does kind of give you an angle for, you know, social settings, and especially being, you know, a teenager or, you know, going into your college years.
That's awesome. And so one of the things, I don't know if I've told you this, but one of the things I love is when you put out recommendations of music. So you introduced me because I love like bluesy and the old soul stuff too, as a musician myself, you know, a hacker, I call myself. I'm the same way. I just love hacking. I love playing. I always tell people, if nobody else in the church can play, I can do it, but I'm probably not your best option. I'm option, you know, B. So, but that being said, I remember one of the guys you introduced me to was it a Kingfish?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. He's
a monster.
I hadn't even heard of him, and all of a sudden you're like, check this out, and I'm like, oh my. I'm like, download this, buy that. I'm like, oh yeah. Yeah,
Christone Ingram. He's a young man from somewhere in Mississippi, but man, just this kid's got it.
Oh, he's a prodigy. He.
You said Kingfish?
Yeah,
Kingfish.
Yeah. When we're done, you gotta Google that one.
Yeah,
he is a monster. He is just and just the sophistication that he plays with. Mm-hmm. It's just, I mean, he's like an old soul. He's got a song about that where, you know, he doesn't overplay, but he knows when to really get into it. And it's just like, wow. I mean,
he's kind of like a young B.B. King.
Yeah.
That's, if I had to describe him, I would say he's got the charisma and that feel of like a BB in his heyday when he would play, and he reminds me a little bit of a young BB King a little bit.
Yeah, and he's got that tone and kind of the maturity of like a Buddy Guy, where he just, you know, he knows the right thing to play at the right moment, and the feeling of what he's trying to. It's just
just sounds out of his soul.
True blues artist.
Oh yeah. Yeah. He's the real deal.
All right.
Yeah, he's.
I'll check him out.
So, anyways, that one in particular, I'm really thankful for, because that's on the playlist quite often. So I love it. So yeah. So, anyways, so we got to that. So now you're doing art. So how does that transfer to doing art and coming to St. Louis? So somehow you get here, because when I'm meeting you, you're, you know, driving the other Isuzu. I drove an Isuzu. You drove an Isuzu back then. I remember that because there wasn't that many of them. And a good old rodeo.
Well, the I guess the path, and I look back. Obviously, it's a God story.
Yeah.
There is no way that you could unwind this thing and say, okay, put that together. There's no way. And so I look at it now, and it's just like you see the hand of God leading me in all of these directions. But I was, I got a BFA. I was going to Austin P, which is in Clarksville, Tennessee, and they have an incredible art program. And there was the painting instructor there was a gentleman named Max Hostetler, and he became really my mentor. He became my advisor, and he's gone now, but God rest his soul. He was just an amazing mentor for me, and one of the finest artists that I knew, and he was just one of those guys where it's just like, I want to do that. I want to be that, and he was just a wonderful role model. But as I was chasing that, I guess in the back of my mind, I thought one of these days Leo Castelli would come down from New York and say, you know, you're wonderful. Let me put you in the gallery, and, you know, which doesn't happen anymore. And so I graduated college with a BFA in painting, and I started working, and I was making, I think it was like $5 an hour, like minimum wage. And I was doing illustrations for a company, and it's like, okay, I'm going to starve to death here.
$5 an hour, yes.
And
Starving artist.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, what did, and you start asking, okay, what did I go to school for? What? And I happened to, and this is another fluke story, but I ended up applying for an illustrator at a bicycle company, just doing, because like on the chain guard of a bicycle, you might need, some bunny rabbits or something on a kid's bike, and I applied for the job and brought my portfolio, and they said, yeah, you would be perfect for it. So the company was Murray, Ohio, which did lawn and garden, Murray mowers, and then Murray bicycles. And I went there and had some success with, some of the things that I was doing. And I think part of it, looking back, was I was now a graphic designer, doing graphic work, but at the same time, I came from a very three-dimensional visual, illustrative field. So I could, like if you're putting something around the hood of a lawnmower, or you're putting something around the tube of a bicycle, being able to see what you're doing and then seeing it in three-dimensional and taking it back to two-dimensional, I can make that transition very easily. And I think that looking back, I see where that helped me. But I had some hits and actually met my wife at Murray, and but there was another competitive bike company that there was a Toy Fair bike that I had worked on, and they saw that, and little did I know, one of the people at this other company, the competitor, said, hey, this is what we need. And again, there's just all these series of God things that happen where they end up calling me and saying, hey, we want you to come and work here. So I go interview, and I'm like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to do this. So come home, they call me back and they say, how about some more money? Okay, I can make another trip. So I make another trip, and they say, bring your wife. So I bring my wife, and my wife's like, yeah. And it's kind of in the middle of nowhere. And she's like, yeah, I don't think we're going to move here. So I said, thanks, but no thanks. So they call me back and say, come back up. President wants to talk to you. Guys, I'm not going to, just come back up. So he essentially said, okay, here's a blank check. And he said, here is your own building. I will not ever bother you. I will not ask you I will not come into your building. You can do whatever you want to. There's a blank check, whoever you want to hire, whatever you want to do. I want you to work for us. And I'm 30 years old.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay. And I go back home and I'm like, Lauren, I'm never, ever going to have this opportunity again. And she finally said, okay, we'll do this. So we went, and we were there for, I want to say 5 years. Anyway, but that's when our kids were born there. And
was it a nice building?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, the crazy thing was that, the Murray was here and Huffy was here. Well, Murray and Huffy always duked it out in the in the mass market bicycle arena.
Yeah, in the chain stores. And when you go to Kmart or Walmart or Target or Venture back then. So. And
that was before the Chinese kind of took over the bicycle industry. So it was all domestic, and Toys R Us was a multi-million-dollar account for all of us. I mean, Sears, Service Merchandise at the time. Target was one of my accounts. I mean, there were all of these, that were literally, each one of these was millions and millions of dollars in our part, just what we sold to them every year. So it was, it was a big deal. So, anyway, I get to, I go to this company, which was Roadmaster, and it was by far the third, kind of in the basement of the bicycle industry. And I would like to say because of me, but I think there were a lot of things that happened during that kind of awakening for the company that, and I was part of that, but there were several people that took us from distant third to second. And then we were where we're going to be first. We designed a product that was the number one selling bicycle as far as revenue in the country, and then we followed it up with another one that actually beat the one. But what happened, long story short, is in any industry, when you are, we were on Forbes 100 fastest growing companies. We were blowing up. And what happened was that Brunswick organization, Big Fish, swims by and says, "Oh, we need that in our portfolio." So they gobbled us up. And within 90 days, everybody from director above was gone except for me.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden, I think they realized, oh, wow, we don't have anybody here that knows anything about bicycles. And they're like, okay, Todd, you are going to go on every sales call. You're going to go on, and that was about the time that Matt was born. My son was born about then, and I was gone all the time. And it was great because, Brunswick was, a very big company with a lot of certainly if you're on that track, it's where you want to be. And especially where I was, because I was in that inner circle of people, the kind of the movers and shakers. And, but I just came to the point, and it was just one of those moments where it was like, I don't want to do this. My son, he was little, but he didn't know me from the mailman because I was never home. And I remember Lauren even saying, she's like, yeah, this isn't what I signed up for. And I'm like, yeah, this is, and I went and told them, I said, well, they came to me and said, hey, you know what? Here's the deal. We're in Lake Forest, Illinois, and we want you to move up to Chicago, and we want you to go to, because we're going to make you the director of marketing over all the bikes, and we're going to, but you have to have your MBA. It's just,
just 'cause
somebody says you have to have your MBA, even though I know more about bikes than anybody else in the industry, in the company, but you have to have your MBA to be the director of bikes. So we're going to have to send you to Northwestern at night. And you're still going to be on the road, and you're going to move your family to Chicago. And I'm like, whoa, nah, I'm out.
Let me get off this train.
Let me get off this train. And I remember and he's like, well, you understand what this means. And I say, yeah, I understand what it means. I get that. I get it. But yeah, I'm not going to do it. And so I took my package, and I, and that's, and I don't know if I'm spending too much time on this.
No, you're fine. This is good. We love getting to know you.
Speaking of those moments in your life, because, I got my stuff and I put it in a cardboard box, and I walked out and I drove it home and I put it in the garage. And, of course, I'm the man. I'm a hot shot. I had 2 people call my house before I got home, other competitors, I'm the man, right? so I flew out to California, met with a couple of them. And I come back home and it's just like, okay, I can have my pick, okay, Lauren, where do you want to live? And I'm really cocky, really, really, really overconfident. And the craziest thing is the phone stopped ringing. And there I was. And I'm like, hey guys, don't you know? And there was just nobody calling. And I remember after like probably 6 weeks of sitting at home, waiting for the phone to ring, I remember I went out in the garage and there was that cardboard box. And I sat on the steps of that garage and I opened that box and I started looking at my career relegated to a cardboard box. And I sit there and I cried like a baby. And I said, God, it's yours. Because this is what my plan got me. Stuff in a cardboard box. My career is in a cardboard box. And anyway, the like a week later, I got a call from a headhunter saying, hey, there's something in St. Louis. And I said, you know what? I'll go there and let's see, and the cool thing was, it's like, we want you to be the creative director, which is what I was when I first started back at Roadmaster. And it's like, we want you to, and it's like, oh, wow, this would be great. I don't have any product development responsibilities or marketing responsibilities. I'm just a creative director again. And they're like, and I was meeting with the VP of marketing at the time. And she said, hey, our CEO wants to meet you, but he's only going to be in for the weekend. And, can you come back up over the weekend and meet with him? And yeah, sure. So it was like 7:00 on a Saturday morning. I had to meet him. So I flew back up I drove this time. I drove to St. Louis, and I go in, his name was Al Fontenot. I go into Al's office and have my portfolio, and I'm got my guns loaded. I'm ready to go. I'm going to get this job. And he sits down and he leans back in the chair and he looks at my resume. And the first thing he asked me, he said, I noticed your pastor is your first reference on your resume. Why is that? Well, I think that there's the person there's the person that I am at work, and then there's the person that I am at home, and the person that I am in life. And I said, I think my pastor can speak directly to the man that I am outside of work, because I think that I don't think they're dual identity. I think they're the same guy. But, I think he can certainly tell you who I am and the person that you're hiring. I can show you my work, but that doesn't tell you the person that I am. And then we just start talking about the Lord. And he says, oh, I'm a pastor. I said, oh. And we spend the next hour just talking about the Lord. And he's like, yeah, you know what? We got to wrap up here. And let me look at your book. And he looks, and he kind of, and seriously, within 5 minutes, he kind of, and he's like, and he says, all right, we'll be in touch. And I leave, and I got, and before I got to the hotel, the phone in the hotel rang, and they had an offer.
That's awesome.
And it was like, you know what? And it was just such a God thing. And it was just like, okay, Lord, I get it. This is where you want me, and this is kind of what you wanted to get me to the point where, I'm humble, and I do understand that, now I'm on your path. And then I ended up buying a house that was 5 doors down from Bill Hunter, who was pastor at the West County Community Church. he and Matt knock on my door as
That's
they would do.
awesome. Yeah.
Knock on my door, hey, brother, why don't you come down to the church? And I said, well, you know what? We just got here. We're looking for a church. He lives 5 doors down from me. Sure, we'll come to church with you. And through West County Community Church, I ended up meeting Albert.
Yeah. Yeah. He was going there.
And, again, and there's another 2 hours of backstory on all this, but that's the thing. I mean, you unravel this stuff, and I mean, how do you put this back together? There's no way.
No,
there's no way. Yeah, and then you take Albert's story and unravel it. Here's a kid from the slums of Santo Domingo, with no shoes, running around trying to shine people's shoes or trying to make sandwiches or sell sandwiches to feed his family. And how does that kid meet the kid from Cunningham, Tennessee? I mean, really?
You're right.
I mean, really, you're gonna unwind this and put it back together? No, this is all God. And when you kind of pull back and you see, it's just it's amazing. Because people say, what's your story? Well, it's not my story; it's God's story. I mean, I just happen to be, the spear carrier in a much greater epic movie. So.
Hey, wasn't that an awesome first part of this interview? I mean, come on, Scott. God working in mighty ways. He goes through all these different things, winds up in St. Louis, and as it just ended, a kid from Nowhereville, outside Nashville, meets a kid who at this point had no significance, trying to earn just enough money to put a little food on his parents' plates down in Dominican Republic, and God is pulling them together in a way that only He can. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, it's one of those things. Well, people would say it's a coincidence, but God has written everybody's story before the foundation of the world, and this just happened to be a chapter that was opened up in his life. And so, some people say coincidence, and I say it was written before time.
Amen. Amen. Well, don't forget to
like and subscribe. That's all. I feel like that's all you want me to say. Like and subscribe. Why don't you guys just watch? If you like something, share it with friends.
Exactly.
If you want to get notifications, subscribe.
And in a few days, check out part 2 of this great interview with Todd Perry and his involvement with Pujols Foundation, because we're going to get into how those two now come together.
Yep.
So,
worlds collide.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thanks again. Catch you next episode.